This program is brought to you by SAMCEDA, the San Mateo County Economic Development Association.
Why should you invest the next 20 to 30 minutes of your time in watching? Have you ever wondered about the people and purpose behind various businesses on the peninsula and Silicon Valley? Who works there? Why? What do these companies and organizations really contribute to our communities? If you are even a little bit curious, take a moment and hear their stories and why business is more than the bottom line. For 7 decades, the San Mateo County Economic Development Association, better known as SAMCEDA, has championed the business community by convening and connecting them to the communities in which they make their home. People hear about Genentech and Oracle, but do they know about Design Tech High School and Future Labs? My guess is no. So we are here and we are going to tell these stories and many more. The stories of your friends and neighbors who work in these companies and how they contribute and collaborate through their employers, with our food banks, our schools, our youth, our sports teams, our art and cultural groups, our veterans and our seniors, how their companies give back and believe in more than the bottom line. On today's show, we have Sunil, Pandya, Market Executive, Wells Fargo Commercial Banking, Northern California, and Blanca Gomez, Vice President, Community Relations, Associate Manager with Wells Fargo. Welcome to More Than the Bottom Line. I'm Rosanne Foust, and I'm your host for today's episode. With me is Sunil Pandya, who is the Market Executive, Wells Fargo Commercial Banking, and Blanca Gomez, Vice President, Community Relations. It's so great to have Sunil and Blanca with us today.
Thank you so much for having us.
We really appreciate it. So what I'd like to do is start by giving the audience a sense of who you are, what your first job was, and how you got into where you're at today. So who would like to start?
After you.
I'll go first. So thank you so much, Rosanne, for having us. I'm delighted to share my story of my first job. I was actually a teenager, maybe 14 years old, when I was tasked with making phone calls to Spanish-speaking households. And my job was to offer free weatherization services for individuals and families in Southern California. And to this day, I can hear the phone ringing.
I love it. That's fantastic. Customer service right from the get-go.
Yes.
Sunil, tell us about your first job.
Yeah, so my first job, I grew up in a household. My father owned his own hotel. And so my first job was to do whatever needed to be done. And so everything from housekeeping to front desk to night audit to any odds and ends of mowing the lawn was my first job. I think he still owes me money for it, but the first job was working with the family.
Well, then how did both of you end up in financial services? I mean, that's, I understand with a hotel,
Yeah.
I mean, finances are a part of it, but tell us.
Yeah, so my first job in financial services was actually with Wells Fargo 17 years ago as a teller. I moved to San Francisco to go to college, and like any college student, needed a part-time job to help pay for tuition. So that's actually how I landed in financial services. I was studying finance, so I knew it was something that was interesting to me, and so you know, going to the bank and getting my first job there was how I ended up with Wells. And from there, and we can talk about this a little bit later, but the company's just great about investing in talent throughout the organization. And so 17 years later, I'm still there. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to hear about that. So we're going to get to, because Wells Fargo really makes a huge commitment to its employees.
Yeah.
And I've heard that over and over. But Blanca, how did you end up in financial services and actually at Wells?
Well, for me, it was not planned at all. I had no reference point. I had no one that I knew that worked for a bank. And so actually, as a career, I wanted to be a history teacher. And so after completing Occidental College, I went to the Executive Fellows Program and was placed at the Trade and Commerce Agency. And fast forward 19 years later, I'm here at Wells Fargo. And currently what I do is work with a lot of the company leaders to execute market strategies to help underserved communities here in Silicon Valley.
What I find interesting about both of your stories, so 19 years, 17 years, you know in today's age, people are moving jobs pretty often. And so there is something in the Wells Fargo sauce, I'll say, about keeping people there. Would you like to touch on it a little bit?
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the tenure of the management team and just the team members in general is something that we take a lot of pride in. And no matter what level of the organization you sort of look at, there are people who've been in financial services or with Wells Fargo for a long time. I'm more proud about the times whenever we have people leave and come back, which happens with a lot of frequency as well. And a lot of it just has to do with the culture, the commitment to the community, and the fact that despite the size and breadth of everything that Wells Fargo does, it's really a very community-based organization. And the team members, we work really hard for the team members to feel that throughout the organization.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
I would add that it also has to do a lot with the coaching opportunities and the opportunities to be mentored at the company. And for me, I've had multiple mentors. One of them was my longtime manager, Tim Silva, who retired after 43 years of service. And he also started as a teller at the bank. And one of his abilities was to help you self-discover the solutions that you needed for the challenges that were in front of you. And that's something that I take away now into my own leadership style.
So I love that you brought up mentoring. And Sunil, I'd like to hear about your mentors. And it'd be great, you mentioned one at Wells Fargo. Let's have a discussion about the importance of mentorship. It is, for me, it's huge. And I look for it both within organizations and also outside. So let's have a chat about it.
Yeah, it's extremely important and something that we put a lot of focus into, Rosanne, because I wouldn't be here without the affirmative work of a lot of mentors who got to know me, and not necessarily just in terms of what my job category was or what kind of the next incremental skill I needed, but get to know me and what I wanted to achieve in my career, both personally and professionally. And I can't put enough emphasis on how important that is, because the advice that they give me was really tailored based on the things that I thought I wanted, as well as things evolved for me, as we started a family, as we moved to San Mateo County. The advice changed, and it was proactive advice, and it's been advice that I've gotten from a lot of different people I've reported to, people who work at Wells, people outside of Wells. And it's really encouraged at the company for you to spend time networking and getting to know as many people as possible who can get to know you on a personal level and give you kind of the advice that you need. So it's something that we all attempt to do and pass on to the next cohort of leaders at Wells Fargo. It's just really important and just embedded within our culture.
I think just that cultural approach to mentorship, and you said it's what you think you wanted as well as I think what they saw in you, which is so important.
It really is, yeah.
So Blanca, with Tim was one of the mentors. Can you talk about other mentors or perhaps people, not specifically, but people that you've mentored, what you've looked for?
Sure, I'm really eager to help individuals that are seeking that just a little bit extra advice or guidance and are on a path for their own success. I love being a resource to them as their professional careers flourish.
What would you say is one of the hardest questions, perhaps, that someone you're mentoring has asked you? Is there anything that just you think about and you're like, okay, wait a second, let me think about that. Does anything come to mind? Just a challenging question, like if maybe they're heading down one way and you think, well, maybe their skills really sort of fit more over here. Anything that just pops up?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the big challenges is the world's just changing so quickly, right? And it's easy to give advice linearly or to speak specifically to what your path was, but just with the way the world changes and with what everybody brings to the table, it's hard to give definitive next step or next two-step guidance. And so it's something we really struggle with, right? And so I think that's what I've learned from my mentors is to find out more about the person and everything that they that interests them or that they might be interested in, and then making sure you kind of build a group around that individual who can help them in various different ways, right? Versus specifically because it's just the world's way more complex than it was even 10 or 15 or 17 years ago whenever I started, right? And so to think that one source of advice is going to be the only key is just not the case anymore. So it's not a specific answer to your question, but I think that's where I've evolved a little bit as the world's changed.
I think it's very helpful because I think listening, what you just said is listening to the individual, figuring out kind of maybe what they aren't saying as well as what they are.
Yeah.
So, and in your industry, because it is changing, it is very fast paced, you have a lot of products and services coming on the market at any given time, and trying to balance that with the needs of an individual, I think it's both exhilarating and challenging.
Right.
So kind of moving into, before we discuss Wells Fargo and More Than the Bottom Line, hence the name of the show, because you do so much, what I'd like you to do is give me a brief overview of Wells Fargo in San Mateo County.
Oh, I'll take that one.
Wonderful.
So Wells Fargo has a rich history of serving San Mateo County, and here's the little history from a history teacher side.
I love it.
Teacher side of me coming out. I'm excited because I learned that Wells Fargo first came to San Mateo County in 1859 when it opened its first office in Redwood City. And as the cities in the peninsula grew, so did Wells Fargo. And back then, Wells Fargo was a bank and an express company, bank and express, which meant that when people needed to move money or shipments, they turned to Wells Fargo. And so as the cities grew in San Mateo, so did Wells Fargo. We opened express agencies in 10 additional cities, including Belmont, Daly City, Pescadero, Half Moon Bay, South San Francisco, San Mateo, Woodside, and I'm sure I'm missing a few others. But it was an exciting time for growth, and in 1918, things changed. The national government actually nationalized Wells Fargo and all of the leading express agencies at the time in support of the World War I efforts. And just like that, Wells Fargo signs across 10,000 communities came down, and they also left San Mateo County. But we returned.
And I'm glad, because I'm like, wait a minute, you might have left, but you came back.
We came back. We continue to operate out of the headquarters in San Francisco, but we came back in 1955 through a merger, and it was through a merger with First National Bank of San Mateo County.
First National Bank, okay.
So that's the history, but today we have 580 team members that work here in San Mateo County. We also have 1,400 team members that reside in the county, and we have 35 locations that include branches, wealth management offices, as well as home mortgage offices.
That is an incredible presence, and that's going to lead into, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get into Wells Fargo's community involvement, which is extremely extensive. So we're going to be right back to More Than the Bottom Line with Sunil Pandya and Blanca Gomez with Wells Fargo. Welcome back to More Than the Bottom Line. I'm Rosanne Foust, your host today. With me is Sunil Pandya, who is the Market Executive, Wells Fargo Commercial Banking, and Blanca Gomez, who is the Vice President, Community Relations with Wells Fargo. Thank you for coming back and joining me for session 2. So now we are going to talk about Wells Fargo and More Than the Bottom Line. I really appreciate you both being here. I know how much Wells Fargo gives to our local communities, and that's really what I want to impart with our viewers today. You are a leader and community involvement and community engagement. So I'm hoping that you can touch on that, touch on the overall aspect of Wells Fargo, and then how all of your team members get involved, because they are out there. Yeah. So Blanca, would you like to kick it off? Yeah. Or Sunil, whichever.
I'll go first. So thank you so much for acknowledging our presence and our support of the community. It's very meaningful to me that in 2018, Wells Fargo provided $1.2 million in philanthropic support here in the county, but also its team members volunteered over 2,300 hours of service. But beyond that, we also provided nearly $15 million in community development lending, and that went to support affordable housing, community service, and economic development efforts. But I'm also really excited about the announcement that was made earlier this summer regarding Wells Fargo's philanthropic strategy, in which we are becoming more strategically focused on the most pressing issues affecting underserved communities in our country. And they are housing affordability, small business growth, and financial health. So we are becoming more strategic with our resources and our expertise to really spark that change that will help our most underserved communities. And for me—
Hats off to Wells Fargo. Hats off. I mean, that's special.
Thank you.
So please.
No, for me, the work that we do around housing is super important. And one of the things that stands out here in the Bay Area is that 75% of the housing stock was built over 30 years ago. Yes. So as our homes continue to age, for an individual that's low income or a family that is low income, making those critical home repairs can be difficult to do.
Absolutely.
And what that means is that sometimes you hear stories of folks, foregoing home maintenance in lieu of medicine or food. Mm-hmm. And so it's really important that we support organizations like Rebuilding Together Peninsula. So every year we have dozens of team members that go out during National Rebuilding Day, and they go out and renovate homes in East Palo Alto. And not only is it the sweat equity that they provide, but they also are matched with philanthropic support for that individual house that's being renovated.
It's just heartwarming to hear that. And I know, Sunil, you'd like to touch on it as well in terms of team members' involvement and that sweat equity piece.
Yeah, when you think about all that great work that the organization does, either through its foundation or via lending, it's kind of a hard story to follow. But luckily we have team members, and I get to talk a little bit about that. And so, we talked a little bit about the tenure at Wells Fargo, and I think one of the things that makes us unique is the team member involvement and just how important it is that our team members are involved in our community. So, in fact, we actually have a dedicated month every year whereby the entire company mobilizes around, we call it the Community Support Campaign, and it has for 10 consecutive years been the #1 giving campaign as voted on by the United Way. And so we're punching way above our weight with this in terms of how much we give in terms of both time and treasure. And that's not just from a company standpoint. What makes me super proud is just the team members' commitment to this. So just to give a couple stats, over the last 12 months, Wells Fargo team members, not the company, the actual team members have donated $75.3 million of their own money and over 2 million of their own hours to their local communities. Wow. Here in the Bay Area, that's 25 million. So when you think about that on a proportional basis. And that's 899 separate giving instances. So this isn't one big lump sum that kind of juices the number. This is each individual thinking about what's most important to them in their local community and being empowered to do that. So we actually give our team members time, in addition to time off, dedicated time, paid time to go out and be involved in their community. And that's something we really encourage them to take advantage of. And then during this month, we have a dedicated day of service where, it'd be great if we could get 100% of the people there, but people take vacations and there is business that needs to get done. But a dedicated day where we try to get as many of our 250,000 plus team members across the entire country out of the offices and into the community with whatever's most important to them. So it's something that we've been doing since I've been here. I know it's been going on since well before then. It's just a fun time of the of the calendar where the entire team, just every day, there's a bake sale, a Habitat for Humanity build, a heart walk. There's just always an event, and it's a really fun time for our teams to come together and be involved in the community because it's just so important to us.
Just what you're talking about, the numbers alone, the commitment to the local community. I mean, one of the goals of this show is really to showcase that commitment from both the corporate side as well as the individual team members. I mean, when you have that kind of commitment, somebody's doing something right. I mean, it must feel really good to be out there and working on, I mean, housing in this area, for sure. And when you have 250,000 team members across your service area, across the entire United States, I mean, think about that. And getting a huge swath of them to commit, that's amazing. Can you maybe tell a few stories about what you've heard from team members? Like, do they come back to the office super energized after they've been out there? How is their reaction? Or what do they say when you say, no, we're giving you paid time off to do this? How does that feel?
Yeah, you know, I'll be honest, for some of us who've been here for 17 years, it's hard not to just take it for granted as part of our DNA. But when you have that discussion with somebody who's new to the team, and it's almost a, well, what do we do? And the answer is whatever you want, right? And so I think there's a little bit of a learning curve there. I will say I was out with a client, and they were asking the banker I was with, one of these great bankers who's on my team, why they moved from their prior institution to Wells, and the individual had a variety of reasons, and he actually cited, said something I learned afterward that I didn't know that makes us unique is the fact that we have these events, and this is, you know, there's a dedicated month of service, absolutely, but just the fact that we support this throughout the year, and then whatever's most important to the individual team member, and it's not necessarily top-down directed. So when you hear the team demonstrate or say that they value it, you know, it's one of those where it kind of reminds you that it's just something that those of us who've been around for almost 2 decades just can, just what we do.
It's special.
Yeah.
And I think you started the discussion, but Wells Fargo is a large financial institution.
Yes.
And that's one thing that definitely makes it unique. I mean, you hear a little bit from others. I mean, we can grant that. But tell me some other things that make Wells Fargo unique in the marketplace and with things like we were talking about.
Yeah, so we're in Silicon Valley, right? And so north, south, and here, this is the most innovative place in the world. And I'm not sure that bank is the first industry you think of whenever you think of some of the most innovative companies in the world, but we are, and we've been actually at the forefront of innovation for a long time. And so that's something that we're very proud of, because innovation in a lot of ways leads to improvement. And so both from a client standpoint, but then also just from a community standpoint, right? And so believe it or not, at one point in time, the Stagecoach was innovative.
Yes, for sure.
But there's all these things that we take for granted now that Wells Fargo is at the forefront of, be it debit card, you know, bank card transactions, ATMs, the first in online banking, which is something you can't think about how else you would interact with the bank now, right? Desktop deposit, which a lot of our small and medium-sized business customers use to save time from having to go to a branch. It's something that we were on the forefront of. And all the way to current technologies whereby you can send money overseas using a variety of different technologies, SWIFT, ACH, or even something that's based upon blockchain. So all of these things that kind of push the envelope and figure out better ways to serve our customers, and then hopefully, by a byproduct of that, also our community. So we have a group within Wells Fargo that's solely focused on innovation. In addition, something that's really unique is that we have an accelerator program where we actually have a group within Wells Fargo that will make investments in early stage companies that have something to do with financial services. And not only the investment, but it's the ability to bring those individuals in and learn from, you know, the diverse experiences of Wells Fargo team members who are buyers of technology or users of technology, and to create that environment to help those local businesses potentially grow at a more accelerated rate. So it's something that I'm just extremely proud of, because it's, especially given where we are, and I think it's something that makes us unique relative to a lot of our peers.
Well, and I think it was so important. I mean, I just took your quote, innovation leads to improvement.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a way to think about it. And all the things you just named, we all take it for granted.
Yeah.
I mean, I have the Wells Fargo app on my phone.
Thank you.
Now, long 20-year customer.
Wonderful.
Actually, 25-year customer. Let me rephrase that. Since I moved here, actually. And I have just been very impressed with the level of service, the level of commitment. And I think when all the things that you named, we forget as consumers that these things have to happen. So to have an innovation team within the bank, I mean, people do think, and I'm not saying anything that surprises you, financial services kind of stayed old-time industry. So this is exciting. We're winding down our segment now, so I'd love for you both to just say some closing things that you'd love for the audience to remember about Wells Fargo.
Ooh.
After you.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, Rosanne, thank you so much for having us. It's a joy to be here with you today. I would say that if anyone has questions on anything that we've shared, they are welcome to reach out, either to a local team member in one of our branches, or certainly find us on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about the company. Obviously, we have a lot of passion around it. And so if there's anything I would just leave with, it's the fact that, we have such a strong commitment to San Mateo County, right? We've been here for 160 years, notwithstanding the small
little blip.
The small history. But our team lives here, our teams work here. This is a vital area here in the Bay Area, and we're just really happy to have the number of individuals from Wells Fargo to represent the company in this community. And thank you for all the work that you do and your support of the company.
Well, Sunil and Blanca, I want to thank you for joining us on More Than the Bottom Line. It really was a pleasure to hear more than I knew about the company, just your community engagement, your commitment to innovation, your commitment to San Mateo County and the Greater Bay community, as well as all over the U.S. So thank you for joining us today on More Than the Bottom Line. We look forward to seeing you on a future episode. On today's episode of More Than the Bottom Line, we have our fun segment entitled Guess the Company. I'm going to share with you 3 facts, and we're going to see if you know who this San Mateo County company is. They are 100% employee-owned since 1986. They built an exceptional resource ecosystem, one that both protects the environment and sustains the local community. And our third fact is they have over 45 operating companies that provide integrated services to over 889,000 residential and 112,000 commercial customers in 4 states. And the company is Recology, our great San Mateo County service provider.
This program is brought to you by SAMCEDA, the San Mateo County Economic Development Association.